Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to Rules Talk, aka me not shutting up for multiple hours. A little bit of feedback from Dane County Fair is to cover the procedure for penalty. Yes, because there was some confusion in the moment, and that happens, and that's okay. But just to go over it really quickly, how to serve a penalty. The first part is, how do you get to the box? Step 1, you got yelled at by a ref. Acknowledge that you got yelled at by the ref. Okay, you can put your hands up and be like, I yield. Basically just stop whatever it is you're doing and just be like, I understand, I have sinned, and I'm going to try to leave. So exit the track to the outside as perpendicular to your position as possible. If you can't move, because you're in the middle of a bunch of people, there's a bunch of action around you, just stand there and wait. Just let all the action go past you. You're not going to get penalized additionally if you can't exit the track quickly. We understand that. It's you're literally stuck between 4 people. Try to go to the out. Don't come into the infield. The kind of one exception to that is you already got hit into the infield and you got the penalty, and it's I'm already stuck here. I'm just going to try and get back out. You're going to skate in the OPR lane to the box. The direction doesn't matter. Communicate with the OPRs as you're going past them. OPR stands for outside pack ref. Yeah, so there's going to be 3 OPRs in that outside lane. When you get to the box, come to a full stop outside of the box, not in the box. This is just good practice to get into. So come to a full stop outside of the box and then control, little steps, sit down gently wherever you are being directed, and follow the instructions from the PBT's penalty box timers on where to sit and sit gently. Middle step, while you're in the box. So a penalty is 30 seconds total, but you're going to sit for the first 20 seconds. Somebody is going to indicate for you to stand. They're going to say color, number, stand. Don't leave the box yet. You have to stay standing in the box, wherever that's taped. But you can stand in any area of the box, so it's I'm going to go stand on the other corner because then it's faster for me to get in, whatever. After standing for 10 seconds, your penalty box timer will tell you color, number, done, and they'll signal for you to leave, and now you may leave the box. If you leave early, you get another penalty, so don't do that. Okay, returning to the track. You want to make sure that you enter behind the pack. Most instances, the pack is somewhere else on the track, and you can usually just jump on and just book it on the track to catch up. You gotta be a little bit careful when the pack is by the penalty box. For example, we got a cut track penalty once by coming in the front engagement zone. So you have to make sure you're not stepping in at that point. If you're ever confused and you're just I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, make eye contact with an official. They'll direct you to where you gotta go. Now let's talk about the rules. Let's talk about our order of operations. So we're gonna talk about a little rule section. I'm gonna give you the TLDR, the things that you actually need to know about that section. If you want to read the legislative jargon, that's homework. And then we'll look at a couple of relevant casebook entries. There are so many casebook entries, I would recommend going and reading them. This is the largest amount of text you're going to see on a slide. So this is the block summary, word for word, from the rules. This is essentially that how do you play roller derby from WFTDA video. So if you're not here to learn the rules of this sport, you're in the wrong place. So we're going to start with game parameters and safety. This section basically covers the meta of the game. Timing, you have 2 half-hour halves that are broken down into 2-minute jams. Each team gets 3 timeouts for the entire game. Each team gets 1 official review per half that they are able to get back if they win an official review. Official timeouts. Officials can just stop the clock whenever they feel like it. Game information, you always have to have visible to the teams, skaters, and spectators the score and how much time is left on the clock. And it talks about the mythical overtime jam. Basically, if we go into overtime, you're not allowed to end a derby game in a tie. If that's the case, you go into an overtime jam. There's no lead, no call-offs. It is 2 minutes, and the jammers immediately start scoring points. There is no initial. And you do that until somebody wins. All right, so now let's get on to the gameplay. To begin with, you have to play on a track that is defined by WFTDA standards. Each team needs to field 1 jammer and 4 blockers, and you identify a jammer because they have a star on their helmet. Now, this is the fun part of this presentation. I'm going to ask you a question, and you get to figure it out. Blue and black skaters repeatedly shift positions between jams. As the jam starts, blue 3-4 is lined up fully behind the jammer line, but is not wearing the star, while blue 2-7 is lined up fully in front of the jammer line and is wearing the star. First part, who's the jammer? Second part, what other outcomes should result of this? Is there anything penalizable, etc.? So Bluetooth 7 is the jammer. Whatever skater has the stars visible on their helmet is the jammer at the time. In this case, the jammer would get a false start warning. So they'd have to yield their position. And blue 3-4 would go straight to the penalty box in this case, because they're not even anywhere close to where they're supposed to be. You gotta be in between the lines if you're a blocker. I got another one. Before the jam starting whistle, red jammer skates backward. They come to a quick stop and sprint forward at the jam starting whistle. Is this penalizable? Why? Jammers cannot be gaining speed derby direction when the jam whistle blows. So you can be rolling forward, but you cannot be actively accelerating forward. Let's talk about lead jammer. How a jammer gets assigned lead. So a jammer, if they have lead eligibility, which I will discuss in a moment, if they are eligible to gain lead, if they legally pass all of the opposing blockers upright and inbounds, and they get to the top of the pack and they pass the final blocker, they are assigned lead. Lead eligibility, how does it work? By default, jammers are lead eligible at the start of a jam. You lose lead eligibility if you take off the star yourself, a teammate takes the star off of you, or you go to the box. If you have lead status, you can lose lead status by taking the star off of your helmet, a teammate taking the star off of your helmet, or going to the box. If the opposite team does it, if it happens accidentally as a result of gameplay, there's no penalty. And there's no issue with it. You can put the star back on and it doesn't affect your lead eligibility or lead status. So accidental is fine, but if an opponent purposefully takes off the star, then that opponent should be penalized for a misconduct, I believe. And then a jammer calls off the jam by having 2 hands on the hips, tapping multiple times. Specifically, the jam ref will not call it until they've seen you tap your hips twice. Yes, the jam ref is the only official allowed to call off the jam. You can say that you're calling it. I've had moments like I was jam reffing for Nay at Skate Wars. Nay made eye contact with me, said, "I'm going to call it," and then very gently tapped her hips, and we were perfect, on sync. So, yes, you can communicate with your jam ref and be like, I'm calling it. Sometimes you got to do like what we did, which was basically jumping jacks. If you're on the outside calling it, it's going to be a little bit harder for your jam ref to see that if they have to look through a bunch of bodies. Be aware that if you get hit to the outside, the call off might be a little slower. Red jammer starts the jam with their helmet cover inside out. These stars are not visible with high contrast. They remove the cover, invert it, and put it back on their helmet. They then legally pass all skaters, including the foremost blocker. Does this jammer get lead? They do get lead because they didn't have lead eligibility until the stars were visible. But that's one of those things where it's like, oh, your gear's kind of fucked, fix it, and then we'll go from there. If the red jammer did remove the star when the stars were visible, then they would have lost lead eligibility, right? So the key thing here is stars being visible. That's why we use reversible ones. So you don't have to think about it. Normally, if you're lining up and the stars aren't visible, a jammer will be like, hey, the star's not visible. So hopefully somebody catches it for you or yells at you to fix it. Red jammer exits the engagement zone but does not earn lead jammer. White jammer is knocked down but not out of bounds. While white jammer is down, the opposing blockers, including the foremost blocker, all skate clockwise, anti-derby direction, behind them. White jammer then stands back up. Does white jammer get lead? White jammer is declared lead as soon as they stand up. The reason, if the jammer, they do have to pass everybody upright and in bounds if they are doing the passing. In this case, the blockers gave up their superior position. So the blockers were dummies, yes. So the jammer has to have the opportunity to pass the blockers upright and inbounds. If they never have the opportunity to do so, and they end up in front anyway, red jammer passes all blockers on their initial trip through the pack, except white pivot. Due to unrelated gameplay, officials declare a no-pack situation. Red jammer remains behind white pivot. Does red jammer get lead? They're not lead yet. If they pass white pivot, then they would be declared lead. So even though there's a no pack situation, the white pivot is still technically the frontmost blocker because at the point where the no pack was called, before the pack was destroyed, white pivot was the previous foremost blocker. So they still maintain that status, even though a no pack is called. So let's talk about pivots, star passes, and blockers. So how do you identify a pivot? They have the stripey stripe. This is important. To pass the star, both the pivot and the jammer need to be upright and in bounds, and they have to both hold the star before the jammer can let go. So it has to be an actual hand-to-hand pass. The pivot has the ability to control the star, and as such, they can take the star, hand it back to the jammer. Anybody else, they cannot touch the star. When you have the stripe on your helmet, you have the ability to control the star. So that's asterisk, keep that in mind. Blocker definition is literally everybody else. So we've defined our jammers, pivots, and then everybody else is just a blocker. White jammer removes their helmet cover and hands it to white pivot. Before white jammer releases their grip on the star, white pivot is knocked out of bounds. White jammer then releases the star to the out of bounds pivot. Is this a legal or illegal star pass? In this case, it is an unsuccessful star pass. The reason being is a star pass is a moment, and it is the moment that the jammer lets go. Because there are plenty of times where you might see like a oh, are we going to do a star pass or not? Where both skaters are holding onto the star, but then the jammer still takes it. They're still the jammer because they didn't let go. If they let go before the pivot went out of bounds, yes, that would have been a legal star pass. Jammer letting go, that is the moment the star pass happens. Yeah, so then if after that point the pivot puts on the star and is like, I'm the jammer now, then you get the illegal star pass, penalties abound, and blah, blah, blah. White pivot's stripe falls off in normal gameplay. White jammer removes their helmet cover, hands it to white pivot, and releases the star. Oh, is this a legal or illegal star pass?
Sorry, I was just assuming that was the question.
Yes, it was the question. I just paused. I'm sorry. Hey, it's almost like I said, hey, this is a tool we'll use for later, like Dora the Explorer. You know, in the case where like the jammer's star gets knocked off their helmet, they're still the jammer. I mean, it's kind of like the same thing with the pivot, in the concept of if you're not visibly wearing the star on the outside, you cannot pick up points. So therefore, you cannot do pivot things if you don't have the stripe on your helmet. Red 2-1 is the jammer. They remove their helmet cover and throw it at Red 4-5, who is the pivot. Red 4-5, still the pivot, catches the helmet cover and hands it back to Red 2-1, who is still the jammer. Both skaters grip the star, then Red 2-1 releases it. Red 4-5 maintains control of the star and puts it on their helmet. Star pass, did it happen and when? It was a legal star pass. The reason being is like while we say like they have to initiate the star pass, the fact that they were both holding onto the star at one point and then the jammer let go, that is the star pass. Remember the cosmic moment, the star must be released into the, you can't throw it, you can't drop it on the ground for your pivot to pick it up and then take it, but they both do have to touch it at the same time and the jammer just has to let go. It doesn't matter if it's the pivot going like, touch it, give it to me, or if the jammer's like, take it, take it. It doesn't matter who it was originally with. They just both have to hold it, and the jammer has to let go. They have to grab it. How many fingers? I don't know. You gotta put wrinkles in the helmet cover. That's what we're looking for. It's like, there's gotta be a scrunch, something. You can't just smack it, because in theory, you need to be able to re-control it. So you need to actually have a grip on it. Jam starts. Where each skater starts. Blockers have to start in between the pivot and jammer lines. The pivots are allowed to touch the pivot line. If they are, everybody else has to be behind them at the hips. Jammers have to be behind or touching the jammer line. They're allowed to touch it. They cannot cross it. The pivot line is the front line. Jammer line is the back. If you are illegally positioned, so this means that you are not in one of those assigned places per your, roll. If you are completely not in the right place, for example, if you are a blocker and you're not even on the track at all, you go back to the bench, womp womp, get your ass on the track. If you are on the track, but you are definitely not in between the two lines where you need to be, you just go straight to the box. But you get to come back in 30 seconds. So sometimes you just gotta yeet yourself onto the track. And then a false start is when you're kind of in your spot. So for example, this might be a blocker touching the jammer line, or it could be a jammer straddling the jammer line. Yeah, so if you're straddling a line that part of you is touching where you're supposed to be, then it's a false start where you need to be like, I yield my position, and you have to allow any skaters around you to take advantage of that. So it's not like a set time that you have to yield for. It's do skaters around you take advantage of your position? If they do, great. If they don't, that's on them. All white blockers, including white pivot, line up legally between jams at the pivot line, but not touching the line. Red pivot lines up behind them. Immediately before the jam starts, red pivot reaches forward with their leg and places their skate on the pivot line. Is there a penalty here, and for whom? Are we talking about the outside boundaries? Okay, yes. On the tape is still in. Once you are over the tape, then you are out. This is one of those cases where you're fucked. So you cannot correct this one. So if the pivot wants to be a brat, they can. The asterisk thing here is that they just have to yield to any skaters nearby them. So if only red pivot was up by them and the rest of the pack was back, they don't have to, if red pivot doesn't move in front of them, there's nothing wrong if they yield their position, right? Or if they willingly move backwards to yield their position. It's a really confusing thing, because then the refs are all trying to yell at all of the white blockers at the same time, and everybody gets really confused, and then some people go to the box because they're like, oh no, I gotta go, I got yelled at, and it's like, it was a warning. In an attempt to reach the track before the jam begins, red blocker jumps from out of bounds. The jam starting whistle blows while they are still airborne. Red blocker lands inbounds and upright after the jam begins. The red blocker is told to return to the bench. The reason, not because they were airborne, but because by being airborne, they still maintain the previous status of being out of bounds. Basically, you maintain whatever previous status you had until something changes. Right. If you leave from inbounds and land inbounds, you're inbounds. That's how the logic works. Make a descency. So the airborne part doesn't matter. You can fucking swan dive onto the track. That's fine. You just have to be touching the track. As the jam starting whistle sounds, red pivot's left skate has rolled backward behind the jammer line. Red pivot is issued a false start warning. Red pivot disengages from play, attempting to yield to skaters in the immediate proximity. No other skaters take advantage of red pivot's attempt to yield. Does red pivot get a penalty? Exactly. Yes, that's how it works. I've definitely called false starts on so many people, and then the blocker is looking at me, and like they rolled backwards 5 feet, and they're like, am I okay? And I'm like, you literally gave up your position. You're fine. If you are on the track, you have to always be ready to receive contact. It doesn't matter if you technically are no longer able to give other people contact. So like in the case of, oh, I got a penalty, I'm not allowed to hit more people, you can still get nailed by somebody else. Absolutely, 100%. So always be ready for contact if you're on the track. Yes, you can resist falling. You can like counter block, protect your space. You have to be a ragdoll. You just gotta let whatever happens to you happen. You know, you just gotta take it. Just take it raw. It's fine. Pack definition. So how a pack is defined? The pack is defined as the largest group of opposing skaters who are upright and inbounds within 10 feet of each other at the hips. It's almost that, but that's the definition that we're working with. To maintain the pack, it is on everybody to try to maintain pack. So if you do something that purposefully destroys the pack, it's a no-no. You get a destruction of pack, you go to the box. If via natural gameplay there is no pack, there is an onus on everybody to reform the pack as quickly as possible. But the front does not have to go anti-derby direction to do so. If you're on the front, you have to stop. You could still be blocking or whatever, but you just should not be continuing to move forward. You should be making an effort to put the brakes on, and the back has to make an effort to accelerate to close that gap. And has to be within a reasonable amount of time. So the engagement zone is the area in which blockers can continue to engage with each other, and that is measured 20 feet from the frontmost or backmost pack blocker. You have to be standing upright and in bounds. If you initiate contact when there's no pack, that's a penalty. If you initiate contact when you have given an out of play warning, penalty. If you initiate contact on somebody who is out of bounds, not straddling, but fully out of bounds, penalty. You can't hit people who aren't on the track. If they're straddling the line, you can still hit them. They cannot hit you. Red blocker 1 blocks white blocker 1 out of bounds. Let's assume this is where the pack is. This is it. We don't have any other white blockers around. They're in the box, whatever. What happens? Does somebody get a penalty? Does the jammer count? The jammer never counts. It's just a no pack. Nobody gets a penalty. Natural gameplay. So I'm blocking somebody and they go out. The asterisk here is that if any of the red blockers tried to do a run back, they would get penalized then, because they are preventing the white blocker from getting in as quickly as possible to reestablish pack. And also, if white blocker just stood out of bounds and didn't get back in, then they get the penalty. The red wall skates forward slowly while the white blockers stand still. What happens? What happens to the pack? Is there penalties? And if so, what and to whom? So no pack is declared, no penalty in this case. But again, a penalty would happen if red didn't stop. The reason being is that the red blockers were slowly going forward. If there was an abrupt change in speed, so if they suddenly booked it, then one of the red blockers would get destruction of pack, because there was no way that white had the opportunity to try to close the gap. But because they were moving slowly, white has the opportunity to correct it. Okay, this one's a little bit of a long one, and we've got multiple questions on this one. Yes, this is all one track. In the image, red 3 and white pivot, which is red 3 and white pivot, are more than 10 feet apart. Just like red 1 and white 3, they're more than 10 feet apart. As such, currently, the pack is composed of white pivot, red 2, white 1, and white 2. Red 1 and red pivot are out of play. What would happen to the pack if white 2 fell down? What if white 1 fell? What if red 2 fell down? What if the white pivot went down? Okay, if red 3 or anybody ahead of them falls down, what happens to the pack? Here's our answers. This one's really freaking hard. So if you could figure this out, you're fine. You understand Pat, congratulations. So when we hit people, please remember the target taco and blocking burrito. The next slide has a picture of the target taco and blocking burrito. Counter blocking. If somebody hits you, you are allowed to defend yourself. So anything in self-defense is legal. An illegal block or assist is when you are out of bounds and you try to block somebody or assist somebody who is in bounds. If you're not upright and in bounds, don't do things. Okay, so how skaters gain position. Skaters gain position. This goes kind of back to how jammers make their points. You have to be upright and in bounds, and you have to pass people at the hips. That's generally what it is. You can't do it in an illegal way, so you can't get off the track to go in front of somebody. All right, so target taco and blocking burrito. Remember, target taco, you can hit anybody except for square in the back and like the back of the legs. You can hit their forearms. Remember this. This is a tool used for later. You can hit their forearms, but on the blocking burrito, you can't use your arms, but you can block with your back. So the key thing to remember about this is the timing of the hit, who initiated. White jammer is on their second trip through the pack and has not yet earned any passes on red blockers. Red pivot receives a penalty and begins to exit the track. White jammer passes red pivot while red pivot is still in bounds. How many points are assigned to the white jammer? So we only really care about white jammer and the red blockers. So we'll just look at them. In this case, red blocker gets the penalty. They're exiting the track. White jammer passes them before red blocker exits the track. Let me put the pivot actually on the outside line. Another reason why you need to get your ass off the track as fast as possible, so you don't accidentally give up your point. So this is the keep in mind. If there were other red blockers in the box, when the white jammer passed the red pivot, they would have also gotten all of the ghost points. The first set of hips that you pass, you get all of the ghost points. So if there's anybody in the box. Okay, now let's talk about scoring. Yay, scoring. How a jammer gets points. Upright inbounds at the hips. White jammer is on their second trip through the pack and jumps the apex, passing all 4 red blockers while mid-air. White jammer's right skate lands inbounds with their hips ahead of all blockers. As a result of this same action, white jammer's left skate subsequently lands out of bounds. How many points are assigned to white jammer? Yep, 4 points. So, yeah, so y'all got the right logic of the status doesn't change until it changes. So, point grouping. So jammers get assigned points. They are grouped together by pass. And the points are then given to them when that trip is completed. And a trip is completed when the jammer exits the front engagement zone. You know, you could pass somebody a gazillion times in a single pass, but you only get their point once. White pivot is sent to the penalty box shortly after the jam begins. Red jammer completes their first trip through the pack and begins their second. Red jammer earns a pass on 2 white blockers before white pivot returns to the track and the jam is called. How many points are assigned to the red jammer? I did just say that. And that is correct. It's almost like the knowledge that we learned earlier is slowly stacking. It's scaffolding! At the start of the jam, red jammer blocks white jammer out of bounds and skates clockwise, anti-derby direction. I'm probably going to demonstrate this one. Red jammer leaves the engagement zone from the rear, re-enters it from the front, and skates in bounds to the rear of the pack. White jammer comes in behind red jammer and gets stuck in the pack prior to restarting their initial trip through the pack. Red jammer skates forward, exits the engagement zone from the front, enters the engagement zone from the rear, earns passes on all opponents, and completes their initial trip through the pack. How many points are assigned? Let me demo this one. Red jammer knocks white jammer out of bounds. Books it backwards. Continues to book it backwards. Comes all the way back through. Excuse me. White jammer comes back in. Red jammer books it. Goes all the way through, comes around, goes through again. Please ignore that track cut. In this case, how many points does the red jammer get? I will demo one more time. Okay, so red jammer knocks out white jammer. Books it backward. Whee! Re-enters the front, goes back through. White jammer steps in. Red jammer books it. Goes all the way around. All the way around, and back through again. Because that negative lap doesn't count for initial. Then they completed their initial, but that doesn't mean that they got any points. I'll explain as I go. Okay, so blocks out, goes all the way around.
Why would you do that?
But in this case, we're like, oh, we go all the way back. Jammer comes in. This is still the negative lap. So nothing happens.
Negative lap, so that's not even your initial.
It's not even initial. It's still the negative lap. Yep. And then we go back around again. Then this is the initial and lead. It's like a number line. Your initial is 0. If you go backwards, then you're in the negatives. Nothing happens. White blocker begins the jam in the penalty box. Red jammer finishes their first trip through the pack and begins their second. White blocker returns to the track behind red jammer. Red jammer earns passes on all opponents and exits the front of the engagement zone. How many points does the red jammer get? If the jammer never gets the opportunity to legally pass somebody upright and in bounds, but did pass other people upright and in bounds, then they get all the points that they never had the legal opportunity to get. Okay, so this is how blockers can protect their point. There's a lot of casebook entries on this section. I don't know why. But essentially, If you want to protect your point, you need to stay in front of the jammer or hit the jammer out before they pass you. If you're out of bounds, they'll get your point. If you're down, they'll get your point. White jammer is on their second trip through the pack. They earn a pass on all opposing blockers except red pivot, who is in front of them. Red pivot forces white jammer out of bounds and then goes out of play. Red pivot turns around, returns to play, and ends up behind white jammer, who is still out of bounds. White jammer re-enters in front of the red pivot and just ahead of the engagement zone. How many points are assigned to white jammer? I will demo this one. We're here. Red pivot knocks white jammer out while still maintaining position. Ends up out of bounds. Ends up out of play. Skates backwards to get back to the pack. White jammer steps in front of the edge of the engagement zone. Correct on the no point, but it is still a cut. The reason being is that when the red pivot initiated contact with the white jammer, they were still in play, and the white jammer went out while they were still in play. After that, the red pivot went out of play. By returning to play, so the fact that they got back before the white jammer got back on the track in front of the engagement zone, then it would be a cut. But it is 3 points at the back end of the pack. Okay, yeah. So in that case, when you have a really long drawback like that, it kind of works the opposite way. So once you're out of play at the back, then the jammer can just come in front of you. But again, you have to get in front before they come back into play. It's the same kind of concept. So I'll show you with the glowing bits. So let's say we got a full run back on the white jammer. Whatever. If the white jammer steps in front while the red pivot is still inside the engagement zone, that's a cut. Yes. Right. But if the red pivot gets the out of play warning and that's when the jammer steps in, no cut. If it's out and then they get back in, then it's a cut. If they're out, then they get in front and then pivot re-enters, still no cut. So the timing of it is really where it matters. Okay, so in the front, pivot knocks out white jammer, goes out of play. If the pivot stays out of play and jammer goes in front, no cut. If the pivot re-enters and then the jammer gets in front, cut. White jammer begins their second trip through the pack. Red blockers 1 and 2 are already seated in the penalty box. Red blocker 3 loses a toe stop and removes themselves from active play. Red blocker 4 is issued a penalty and is told to remain on the track but skates off anyway. White jammer skates past their teammates and red blocker 4 while the officials tell red blocker 4 to return to the track. How many points are assigned? I'm going to demo this one. Because if you're the last blocker, you're responsible for pack. Okay. We've got blockers 1 and 2 in the box. Blocker 3 steps off the track to fix a toe stop. Blocker 4 gets a penalty and fucks off, even though they're told to stay. White jammer scoots by. How many points? It is 4 points. Again, if they never had the legal opportunity to pass somebody, they still get the point. Red jammer commits a penalty at the beginning of their second trip through the pack, not having earned any passes on opponents during that trip. While red jammer is in the penalty box, 2 white blockers are sent to the box. Red jammer is released and returns to the engagement zone. The pack is moving fast and red jammer does not pass anybody. The other 2 white blockers are released and returned to the track behind red jammer. And then the jam ends. How many points are assigned to red jammer? Correct! That's exactly how it works. Wow. Wow, it scaffolds. Wow. Red jammer begins a scoring trip and is ahead of white jammer. Red jammer earns passes on 3 white blockers, but remains behind white pivot. White jammer successfully passes the star to white pivot, but remains behind red jammer. Red jammer completes their scoring trip, having never earned a pass on the original white jammer, who is now a blocker. How many points does red jammer get? It's a 4. This is another ghost point situation. Okay. Yeah, so in this case, it is a ghost point situation where because the status of who was the blocker suddenly switched to the blocker behind them, they never had the opportunity to pass them when they had superior position. Therefore, they still get the point because they did pass everybody else. You'd think it's tricky, but it's not. So what happens when jammers commit sin? Jammers in the sin bin. This is where things get interesting. Jammers still have to do the penalty like everybody else. There's nothing special unless there's a jammer swap, which is the next section. Officials can mess up the score. We are human too, it happens. You can make a correction up until the ending of the next jam. Once that has happened, you can't go back and change the score. Red jammer completes their first trip through the pack and has not passed any opposing blockers when they commit 2 penalties in quick succession. They are sent to the penalty box for 60 seconds, during which all 4 opposing blockers also commit penalties and are sent to the box. Red jammer returns to the rear of the pack, but the jam ends before they can pass any opponents. How many points does red jammer get? Red jammer didn't pass anybody else, so they don't get any of the ghost points. Yeah, so that's the case of if there were blockers still in the box and the red jammer actually passed anybody, then they get the ghost points. This is the penalty section. Read the casebook. What happens when I hit the wrong part of your body? If you initiated the hit, this is what happens if I hit you in the wrong part of the body. So these are the things that you can't do. Red jammer skates along the inside line and attempts to jump the apex to pass the pack. White pivot legally initiates a block to red jammer's upper arm, which knocks red jammer off balance and their jump comes up short. Red jammer falls out of bounds. They fall small, but their momentum causes them to slide back onto the track into white blocker's legs. White blocker trips over red jammer and falls. Is this penalizable, and if so, why? Penalty! You still can't take out people at the legs. It doesn't matter if it wasn't your fault. Because they had that forward momentum, even though they fell small, as a result, their fall took up a bigger amount of space because they slid. So then it's still a penalty. Red blocker initiates a chest-to-chest block against white blocker. The force of the impact causes secondary contact of red blocker's upper arm to white blocker's neck. White blocker's head jerks back, but they do not fall off balance or go down. Is this penalizable? And if so, on whom and why? So in this case, red blocker is penalized. In the case of any head contact where the officials see any movement of the head as a result of the contact, it's illegal. Since there was that whip back, we're like, okay, that had enough impact. High block, go to the box. Again, it depends on who initiated, right? Yeah. So if you like lead forward and you're like, oh, I bonked my own head, it's like, okay, leading with the head, you shouldn't do that. White jammer approaches the rear of the pack, targeting red blocker. Well before impact is made, red blocker sidesteps, presenting their back, an illegal target zone. Remember your target taco. White jammer makes contact anyway and knocks red blocker down. Is this penalizable, and to whom and to why and why? In the case where there was time to change direction, it is on you to change direction, to not hit somebody. If there was no reasonable opportunity to avoid the illegal target zone, then it's not a penalty. So this comes into who initiated the hit or who initiated the block. So if the blocker immediately steps in front of the jammer into their path and there's no chance for the jammer to change direction, then it's not a back block. It was initiated by the blocker. But in this case, because they were like, I'm chilling, and then got nailed, then it's a back block. Red jammer is approaching white blocker 1. White blocker 2 initiates a legal block on red jammer at the last second, forcing them out of their trajectory and directly into the back of white blocker 1, without any opportunity to recover before making contact. White blocker 1 receives forceful contact, but maintains their position ahead of red jammer and does not otherwise lose position. Is this a penalty? If so, why? Whom? If it's not a penalty, also why? In this case, it is correct that there is no penalty. The way that penalty assignment works, it's a human centipede, and the ass gets it. If in this case it was a red blocker that assisted red jammer, then the red blocker would get the penalty for the back block. But white on white, it was their own team. You can break your own teammate, unless it's really, really egregious. I hit you with the wrong part of my body. Remember the blocking burrito. White blocker is knocked off balance and grabs a hold of red blocker's jersey in an attempt to regain their balance. Red blocker remains standing, but is significantly slowed by the pulling at their jersey. White blocker regains their balance. Is this penalizable, and if so, why? White blocker gets a forearm, goes to the box. In this case, it's an assist. You can grab your teammates' jerseys. You cannot grab opponents' jerseys. In addition to slowing down red blocker, it prevented white blocker from falling, which would have changed their status. So if there's anything that affects a status, that prevents a status that otherwise would have happened, then it's also a penalty. So keep that in mind. That's also impact of gameplay. Red jammer enters the rear of the pack and is blocked towards the outside line by white pivot. Red jammer is knocked off balance and grabs onto white pivot's jersey, which prevents red jammer from stepping out of bounds. Red jammer regains their balance in bounds without gaining relative position. White pivot remains stable and unimpeded. It's a forearm. Again, it comes back to that status of that idea of this prevented a change in status, which has an impact of gameplay. Okay, let's talk about the other ways that I can't hit you. Directionals. You can't hit people the wrong way. You can't hit people anti-derby direction. Out of bounds block. You can't be out of bounds and hit somebody. You also cannot hit somebody who is fully out of bounds. If somebody is straddling, you can hit them. They can't hit back. Out of play block. You can't hit somebody when you've received the out of play warning and you are out of play. And you also can't hit a downed skater. Don't do that. Don't be a dick. Red blocker uses a legal blocking zone to initiate a block to a legal target zone of white blocker. White blocker is pushed until one skate is in bounds and one skate is out of bounds. Red blocker continues to block until white blocker is fully out of bounds. Red blocker reinitiates a new block that knocks white blocker down. Penalty where and why, and on who? The reinitiation is the key word here. You can sustain contact with somebody and have them go all the way out, but you cannot reinitiate once they're out. I mean, sometimes you just get really locked in and you just do it. But like I've literally seen this happen, where it's like the blocker's just so keyed up about it and is like, I'm gonna hit you the fuck out, and it's like they were already out. Sorry, bad touch. Go to the box. Illegal contact. White blocker initiates contact to red jammer during the jam ending whistle. Red jammer stumbles significantly off balance after the jam ending whistle. The jam ending whistle is the first set of 4 whistles. Da 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 da. And then it gets repeated so that everybody hears it and makes sure that we know that the jam's over. Is there a penalty? During those first 4, you can still initiate contact. The da 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 da. Once that's done, you cannot initiate new contact. But there's a little bit of leeway there. If you're fully committed to a hit and the momentum is there, there's no chance to change trajectory. We don't fault that either. It's the 4th whistle that actually ends it. Da 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 da. If you start anything after that, illegal contact, late hit. Go to the box. Red jammer is 18 feet ahead of the pack alongside white pivot. They continue to skate, and an official gives an out-of-play warning to both players. White pivot continues to skate alongside red jammer and then blocks red jammer, making hip-to-hip contact. Red jammer counterblocks white pivot in an attempt to remain upright and continues on their way. White pivot falls as a result. If there is a penalty, who gets a penalty and why? So in this case, white pivot initiated contact after receiving the out of play warning. Red jammer was in self-defense. Red jammer is free to do whatever the fuck they want. Skating, anti-derby direction. There's nothing specifically in the rules saying that you can't. It's just that the rules are written in such that normal play is assumed to go derby direction. So strategically, You go backwards if you want to pull a track cut on somebody. That's really the only time. Or you have to skate backwards to maintain pack. You can't hit anybody going the wrong way. So it's assumed that normal gameplay is derby direction, but that doesn't mean that you are prevented from skating backwards at all. So oops, I clotheslined you. Oops, I elbowed you. These are other not so legal moves. Multiplayer blocks. If you're holding on to your teammate and your arm is the thing that is preventing somebody from going through and you do not drop your arms, that is a multiplayer. Remember the blocking burrito. You cannot block with your forearms. Pinning. Pinning is when, if you cannot extricate your limb from somebody else, you can't knee somebody in the ass. You can't elbow somebody in the diaphragm. That's pretty self-explanatory. You also can't crush people, so that's putting your weight fully on somebody and just squishing them down. Yes, you cannot punch down, literally. Red blockers form a 3-person wall, separating white pivot from the other white blockers. The middle red blocker hooks arms with the outside red blocker. White pivot initiates a block against the middle and outside red blockers, attempting to drive between the two skaters, but fails to make any progress. All blockers remain upright. What penalty and on whom? So in the case of a multiplayer, it's whoever's arm is being challenged that cannot drop. That's the one that should get the penalty. And so in this case, because the middle blocker did most of the work to get engaged with the other blocker, then the middle blocker gets the sin, goes to the sin bin. In the case where the official can't tell, it's literally whoever's closest. White blocker is in a downed position on the track directly at the skates of white pivot. Red blocker initiates contact to white pivot, causing white pivot to fall onto and over white blocker. Is this a penalty? And if so, who gets it? Red blocker gets the penalty. Remember your human centipede. The ass gets the penalty. Because the end result was white tripping over white, again, it's who initiates in that case. Asterisk, if white pivot had the opportunity to change direction and avoid, then it would have been a no penalty. But because white pivot didn't have a chance to not fall over their own teammate, illegal positioning. So this is where you're not allowed to be. So this can be you destroyed the pack. Don't do that. This could be failure to reform. So you didn't do your job of making the pack exist. That's also a problem. Skating out of bounds. You can't just skate out of bounds. You can't just leave without reason. Those reasons being safety, a penalty, or somebody else hit you. And then false start. So we're returning to the false start warnings and, penalties. Red pivot is the only red blocker on the track. Red pivot intentionally skates out of bounds. So there are tiers of penalties. So it would be a destruction of pack in this case, because a destruction of pack is worse than skating out of bounds. There is actually like a chart that describes the tiers. White blockers form a 4-person wall, blocking red jammer at the rear of the pack when no pack is declared. One white blocker skates forward to reform the pack, but does not do so for several seconds. The remaining 3 white blockers continue to actively block red jammer before the pack is declared reformed. Is there a penalty? Who gets it? And what kind of penalty? It's the active contact. All blockers are obligated to reform the pack, but continuing to block during a no pack is considered firstly a failure to reform. But because there's also that I'm initiating contact continuously during a no pack, then it elevates it. It would be illegal contact in this case, because illegal contact takes priority over failure to reform. So how do you choose which blocker? It depends. In this case, it would be like you have to kind of see it. So it would be who was initiating contact or who was initiating contact more. Sometimes it's just one of you go. Gaining position. Track cuts. White pivot and white blocker are ahead of red pivot when no pack is declared. Red pivot is forced out of bounds by white pivot. White blocker skates clockwise behind both skaters. Red pivot re-enters the track behind white pivot and ahead of white blocker. Is there a penalty? So white pivot and red pivot are actually both penalized. So white pivot gets the penalty for illegal contact during the no pack. The thing is though, white blocker had position prior to the no pack being called. And then they skated backwards. And then because red pivot still stepped in front of them during the no pack, they gained position. Because during the no pack, you still maintain whatever status you had previously, right? So if you had superior position before the no pack, you would have it afterwards. White pivot and white blocker are ahead of red pivot. White blocker forces red pivot out of bounds illegally and receives a penalty. As white blocker leaves the track, they accidentally clip the skates of their teammate, white pivot, who falls. Red pivot re-enters the track ahead of both skaters. Is this a penalty? Who gets it? If so, why? If not, why not? When the white blocker receives their penalty, they don't count for pack or positioning anymore, even if they're still physically on the track. Again, they can still be hit and you can still score points on them, but they don't count regarding superior positioning. And then the pivot, because the pivot was down, they are not upright and in bounds, they don't count. If they stood back up first, then it would have been a cut. How you got hit out doesn't matter. The re-entering is what matters. White pivot, white blocker, and red jammer are 18 feet ahead of a stopped pack. White blocker skates forward and is given an out-of-play warning as white pivot blocks red jammer out of bounds. White blocker skates clockwise back to the pack. Red jammer re-enters the track ahead of white blocker and behind white pivot. Is there a penalty, and if so, who gets it? Or is it a no call? So, in this case, it's no penalty because the moment that the red jammer was out of bounds was when the white blocker was out of play. And that's the part that matters, right? So at that moment, if you're out of play when somebody goes out, they don't have to give a shit about you because you don't count. Okay, so what happens when the entire team sins? So there are situations where the penalty just goes to the captain. That happens when there are issues with the gameplay itself. So for example, a jam can't start because a jammer wasn't fielded. So it's like a procedural thing. Captain has to serve the penalty. Or if it's like, oh, one of your bench staff just cussed out an official, somebody's serving the penalty. Officials give skaters a 5-second warning before the start of the next jam. White team finishes their discussion, and 5 white skaters approach the track. All are in bounds, but ahead of the pivot line as the lineup time expires. What happens? So the jam is called dead. The white captain has to serve in the box because not a single blocker was in play. One blocker has to be in play. So in this case, if you're completely out of position as a blocker, where it's like, I'm on the track, but I'm not anywhere near the jammer or pivot lines, I'm not in between them, you would go straight to the box. So as a result, all 4 blockers would have to go to the box immediately, but then there was no establishment of what previous pack was. You can't make somebody stay arbitrarily. During the lineup time, a red blocker is seated in the penalty box. Red team fields 4 blockers on the track. Officials do not notice the extra blocker, and the next jam begins. Immediately after the jam starts, an official notices and instructs a red blocker to return to their team bench. The red blocker leaves as instructed. Is there a penalty? Does the captain have to serve? In this case, it's no penalty because it was immediately corrected before there was impact of gameplay. If they had started and there was impact of gameplay, then the jam would be called dead and then the captain would serve. So the key thing here is the timing of it because it's not on the officials to keep track of this stuff, but officials, if they see it ahead of time, will normally warn, color, you have too many blockers on the track, and then people sort themselves out. Let's talk about some other sins that you can do. Other illegal procedures. Read the casebook on this one. There's a lot of funky examples, but we're just going to go through a couple of examples of what you can't do. There are plenty of ways you can do derby wrong. Read the casebook. White blocker is seated in the penalty box and asks someone on the bench to toss them their water bottle. A teammate on the bench throws a full water bottle of water at the white blocker, who catches it just before it hits a penalty box official in the face. The person who throws it gets the penalty. If it hit the official in the face, that would have been an immediate expulsion. Both benches would have gotten a warning, and if it happened a second time, no matter who did it, it would be an immediate expulsion. During the jam, an official notices a mouth guard on the track. No skater is making an immediate attempt to retrieve the mouth guard. What should happen? So the jam is immediately called dead. If there's any skater on the track who doesn't have their mouth guard, they get the penalty. If it's just some random one, whoever goes to pick up the damn thing is gonna get the penalty. If it's your mouth guard, that was your responsibility. So let's talk about unsporting conduct. So this is what happens when you don't listen to officials. That's the TLDR of this section. So listen to officials and don't be a dick. That's the takeaways. Having been released from the penalty box, white blocker heads back to the track using a forearm to push a referee out of the way so they can keep the line. When you mess with the ref, you get expelled immediately. Basically, if you do anything purposeful to a ref or an official, you're just gonna go home. White blocker is standing in a wall alongside their teammates. Red jammer jumps at white blocker, making forceful contact while airborne. Red jammer had no reasonable expectation of landing in a legal manner. White blocker, however, remains upright. So this is a case where it's like the officials are going to be like, okay, you're at least getting a penalty for that. And probably between jams, they'll call an OTO and be like, are we going to expel this? Was this egregious enough? Flying at somebody is not a good move. Don't do it. Red jammer moves through the pack and is legally blocked by white blocker to the infield, immediately colliding with the jammer referee, which causes the jammer referee to fall. So red jammer is not penalized in this case because, the original contact was legal. It was in play. It's a thing that happens. As a jam ref, you might get hit by a body. The worst time for blockers. So this is blockers in the box and queuing. Everybody's supposed to be in the box. We do this thing like we've mentioned before, queuing. So there always has to be a blocker on the track in order to maintain pack. If you are in the queue, you are able to pick up additional penalties. So keep that in mind. A thing to keep in mind, when you have multiple blockers that are in the box, there are only 2 seats. So only 2 blockers can be sitting. If somebody else is going to the box and both blockers are still seated, they have to be in the queue. But if there's somebody who's standing and a seat is available, then you can go sit down. Worst time for jammers. Jammer swaps. If you are a jammer and you're in the box and the other jammer gets a penalty, when they sit down, the penalty box manager will tell you to get back up, and the other jammer will only sit for as long as the first jammer had to sit for. So that's the only case where you don't sit for a whole 30 seconds. What happens if you get too hurt to serve your penalty? Substitutions. If you're like, I'm injured, but I have to serve a penalty, somebody else can serve it for you. It has to be, it could be a captain, it could be any other skater. They just have to be in the same role. So if you are a blocker, they need to fill the position as a blocker. If you were a jammer, they need to fill the position as a jammer. If they were a pivot, they have to fill the position as a pivot. What happens if you sin too much? When you commit 7 penalties, that's when you foul out. Once you do the 7th, you're done. If you do an egregious penalty, you can just get expelled. Tell to go home. Basically, try not to commit too many sins and try not to commit any egregious sins and you will be okay. While in bounds and in play, white blocker initiates an extremely forceful block with a legal blocking zone to a legal target zone on red blocker. Red blocker is knocked airborne, crashes to the track, and remains still until the jam is called for injury. Red captain calls an official review and requests that white blocker be expelled for an egregious hit. The answer is no penalty because the contact was done legally. So that's the thing that matters here. So even if you can get your shit rocked, as long as it was done legally, you're not going to get a penalty for it. Please be aware that people can rock your shit. They can rock your shit at any time. Red blocker receives their 7th penalty and immediately leaves the track. Knowing they have fouled out of the game, they go to their bench, collect their belongings, and exit to the locker room without reporting to the penalty box. No additional penalties are warranted. So the penalty time starts as soon as the box is made aware that the 7th penalty has occurred. If it goes into the next jam, that skater cannot serve their penalty anymore because they've been fouled out. So in this case, you would use a substitution. So somebody else would sit for the rest of it. Just do the default, go to the box. the box people will tell you what to do. So we're in the officiating chapter. This is the home stretch. We're almost... Okay, officiating stuff. This is official officiating business. There's a couple things that I will read so that you know what officials are responsible for, because they are actually responsible for things, if you didn't know that. Quick things. Distinction. Referees are responsible for assessing and enforcing penalties, must be on skates, and must be uniformed in a manner that clearly identifies them as referees. Each game must also staff enough officials to effectively track the state of the game such that the rules can be enforced in real time. So this is the score, jam time, period time, which skaters have been assessed, how many penalties, which have been served, which skaters are not allowed to skate. For example, expulsion, fouling out, or jam called for injury. Also, if you get injured and a jam is called because of your injury, you cannot skate in the next 3 jams. But if you're like, oh, I got tweaked, I got injured, whatever, and you have the ability to get off of the track, you either get into the infield or the outfield, the jam will not be called because you were able to remove yourself from gameplay. Duties. All officials are responsible for keeping the game running safely and smoothly by ensuring that the rules of the game are followed. So basically, you make sure everybody's safe and you make sure that gameplay runs smoothly. That's what officials do. Communication between skaters and officials. Everybody's got to be nice to each other. The officials have to be nice. The skaters have to be nice. The bench staff have to be nice. If anybody's not nice, they get told to leave. More officiating business. Assessing penalties. You need to assess a penalty if it has impact of gameplay, and you should only assess a penalty if you are 100% certain. So in that case, you have to see the before, during, and after. You have to say who did what to whom and what impact of gameplay it had. And the metric that we like to think of is only call it if you can defend it in an official review. So there might be plenty of times where you're like, that was a forearm, and it's like, dog, I literally blinked and missed it. So, be nice to your officials. Don't get into the habit of yelling at them about penalties. Don't do that. You can get penalties and expelled for that kind of shenanigans. White blocker is penalized while blocking red jammer. After acknowledging the call, white blocker continues blocking red jammer to allow white blocker's teammate to get in position and impede red jammer's progress. White blocker then exits the track. Is this penalizable, and if so, why? They got the penalty. They still affected gameplay. They should get a penalty. One thing to keep in mind, a skater is not required to leave or act as if they've received the penalty until the official has correctly called color, number, penalty with the correct hand signals. Personally, if the ref is looking at you, making eye contact with you, and yelling in your general direction, and you're pretty sure it's most of your number, you can assume it's probably you. And, I've assessed tons of penalties where the skater looks at me, makes eye contact, and goes, me, to clarify that it's them. So they're acknowledging that a penalty is being called, but they're making sure that it is them. And I'm just like, yes, it's you, go to the box. White blocker commits a penalty and is directed to the penalty box by an official. White blocker skates towards the penalty box, remaining inbounds for a significant distance before exiting the track. This is penalty for not quickly and efficiently getting off of the track. Congratulations. We made it to the end.
Woo! Thank you, Fury.
We got a truck, the cinnamon rolls.
Cinnamon rolls.
Yay.
Eat them now before they get cold.
Okay. If anybody wants to break for cinnamon rolls, now is the time. Ugh, I knew the cat would sin. I felt it in my bones.
I mean, you did warn us.
Yes. She's a human food connoisseur. So don't give up your position willingly. Stay in front of the jammer. Mudang. Okay. I clicked it twice. It does sound so cosmic. The moment the stars released into the bounds of the galaxy. Correct. This one is a menace. This one's fun, though. It's a menace. There's no structural integrity in these titties. Yes, this is a great meme. When your own jammer uses you as wrecking ball the rest of the pack, some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I am willing to take. Oh, this one's a meaty one, and everyone will hate you. But that's too damn bad because the official score is what everybody sees, not what anybody else calculated. Ding, ding, ding. You can't be wrong if your source that is wrong is also the only right source. Thou shalt pass people upright and inbounds. Booking it. There's just a little tripod set up straight into the bag. Yeah, we were like, okay, immediate back block, but also we're gonna expel you. It's like, you know better. Only grab your friend's titties. That's the only thing allowed. Don't grab anything else. I'm just gonna squat right over your head so you can't stand up. I'm gonna force you to teabag yourself. 4 hours later. That is definitely this entire video. I've never done a team sport before in my life. How does this work? There's collective penalties? What? And this is the point where I ran out of funny memes and I just found pictures of people in the box. Nerds.space. You can pull it up on your phone and just drag. You can just drag the little dudes around the screen. Yup. The jammer can do no wrong. The jammer can do no wrong, and it is always all of the blocker's fault. It's like, I'm so sorry that you ran over my fingers. I am so sorry that I even came close to an iota of any part of your body. I apologize for my existence. 7 deadly sins. It's a Catholic sport. The refs, we don't count. I don't got enough space in my brain. I can only count to 4. We're almost done. It sets a bad example for the kids. Exactly. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God, we made it.